Welcome back to Remembering America 250. I'm your host, Matthew Hebebrand. Today, we celebrate the 250th birthday of the United States Navy. As we've seen from prior episodes, there had been several naval engagements since the beginning of the conflict between Great Britain and the United Colonies of America, and it was becoming increasingly important for America both to protect itself from the British Navy and also to engage in offensive operations to disrupt the British supply of war material to the troops here in America fighting the Continental Army. So there were a couple events that led to the consideration of the Continental Congress to create a Continental Navy. Remember, at this point, there was no Navy. The naval engagements that had occurred had really been between private citizens who had their own vessels that they had armed under the direction either of a local committee of safety or one of the individual colonies. But it was becoming more and more important for America to protect itself at sea. One of the first colonies to understand this was Rhode Island. Back in June, their General Assembly had authorized a resolution encouraging the Continental Congress to create a united Navy. That did not come to the attention of the Continental Congress until October 3rd. At that point, Congress punted on it. But then 2 days later, they received reports that the British Navy had basically been able to go back and forth between Britain and Canada to arm the troops in Canada, knowing that at that point there were operations going on under General Schuyler to invade Canada. And the delegates to the Continental Congress were dumbfounded that nothing had been done to stop these ships. So they created a special committee that consisted of John Langdon, Silas Deane, and John Adams. They reported back that very day to the full body to recommend that George Washington be given the authority to outfit 2 ships with arms there in Boston and take command of them. They also separately requested from the colonies of Connecticut and Rhode Island 2 ships apiece to be sent to Boston to serve under General Washington's command. A week later, they considered this same issue, and this was on October 13th, 1775. The Continental Congress authorized the construction of 2 ships that would be armed, and they authorized a special committee of 3 to both figure out how to pay for it and to purchase those 2 vessels. Those 2 vessels would be named the Andrew Doria and the Cabot. And since today we also happen to be commemorating Columbus Day on this day, I think it's important to recognize who those ships were named after. Andrew Doria may not be a name that may be recognized today, but back in the late 17th century, Andrew Doria had been renowned as being one of the greatest naval officers in history, certainly of the 16th century in Europe. He was from Genoa, but fought under almost a number of medieval rulers, including the King of France and the Holy Roman Emperor. And Cabot is named after the John Cabot, who was the first European since the Viking Age, on behalf of King Henry VII, who first discovered North America. And of course, he was also an Italian. His original name was Giovanni Caboto, and his son, Sebastian, is actually, again, under the rule of King Henry VII, is actually the first the first European to have gone all the way down the coast from Newfoundland all the way south to the Chesapeake. And so that's who those 2 ships were named after. John Adams, writing years later, would be astounded at the pushback within the Continental Congress over these 2 resolutions. As you can imagine, many in the Continental Congress saw this as a provocation. Again, they were still hoping for reconciliation with Great Britain, and they recognized that Great Britain had the greatest navy in the world. Samuel Chase of Maryland, in fact, is alleged to have compared the creation of a continental navy to a baby wrestling with the jaws of a walrus. That was how insignificant these two ships that they were debating would be in the face of the greatest naval force on the earth at that time. But they would go on 2 months later to finally consider the resolution of the Rhode Island General Assembly, and would expand the Navy to 13 frigates, and they would also expand that special committee to 13 members, one for each colony, and that naval committee was given the authority to oversee the Continental Navy, to appoint its officers, to review the verdicts of its court-martial, and to purchase additional vessels. The Continental Navy would go on to engage with the British Navy in numerous battles, which we'll go over in future episodes. But by the end of the war, only 11 vessels remained of the Continental Navy. And as over the course of a couple years, the then Confederation Congress would end up selling those vessels to earn more money. And by 1785, the last vessel that had fought in the War of American Independence on behalf of the Continental Navy was sold off. And the Navy was essentially defunct until 1794, under the new United States Constitution, under our first president, George Washington, a new Naval Act was passed, creating a permanent Navy. And then under John Adams in 1798, a new Department of the Navy, which was a cabinet level position, was created. And because of John Adams' role in creating the Navy from that very first committee on October 5th of 1775 to its creation as a cabinet level secretary in 1798, he is now considered the father of the U.S. Navy. So with all those varying dates with the establishment of the Navy never had an official birthday until 1971, when the Department of the Navy declared that October 13, 1775, and that resolution from the Continental Congress is what should be considered the establishment of the United States Navy. So to all of you who serve in the Navy, you have my unending gratitude, and I say Semper Fortis, happy birthday, and to all of you, God bless you, and God bless America.